Alright, here is another project of mine. It's an old East German all solid 17-inch former unknown imperator. I don't know the brand, unfortunately. And we're gonna check it out, what this guitar needs, and restore it to make it play great again. So let's see what it needs. There's a crack in the top, an open crack. It's moving, so we're gonna fix that. Close it. I think it won't get invisible, unfortunately. What else? This looks good. The varnish is in amazing condition, but the top is another color than the back and front. Back and sides, sorry. This is very nice. And there's still red spots in the back. I'm not sure what this is all about. It doesn't look like it was refinished to me. But sometimes varnish can change its color. Two tune-up buttons are non-original. It looks weird. This is a Stauffer style neck with a screw, so you can easily take the neck off and change the neck angle. That's great. What else do we have here? I'm just doing a voiceover, and I'm just, you know, talking as I go. I don't have enough time to spend a lot of time on these YouTube videos. Alright, I think we can check the neck. The neck is unfortunately banana. The action is very high. It was like around 4 to 5 millimeters. So double the amount that you would like be possible. And that is to a banana neck and also to the wrong neck angle. The neck angle is, the bridge is all the way to the bottom, and the strings are high. So the first thing I want to check when I'm in my space is the bracings. So you can take a mirror and a nice light and check if the braces are still nicely glued in place, because often that's not the case and you want to know that as soon as possible. Luckily with this guitar it looks good. There. Okay, here's a better view of the crack. I will try to glue that. I already taped it off a bit so I don't mess around with the glue too much. I will now use a special dentist, I don't know what's called, pliers, and some lighter fluid to clean it from the inside. So if I cleat it, the cleat will actually stick to the wood. So now you can see me trying to rub it in the right place. Yeah, this is a special pliers I found on the local flea market, and especially in archtop guitars it's very difficult to reach those places, and the U form of this pliers make it really handy for this kind of operations. So now we add the glue. You don't see everything I do. On this video I cut quite a bit because I think otherwise it's a bit monotonous. Sorry, I'm not English native, so if I use wrong words, but I think you get the point. So I'm trying to push in the glue here through the crack, and also I already prepared a cleat and a clamp. And now I use a very thin part of this feeler gauge to try to get in the glue into the crack. And then I will use a nice clamp with a nice piece of old maple to cleat the crack from below next to the sound hole, and at the same time on top a block to squeeze everything level, because this crack wasn't really level. You have to try to get this crack level so you can afterwards sand it and polish it. And this is not easy with old cracks often, because the wood already got used to its new shape. And here you see me failing, because I notice I actually have to take the strings off to be able to turn this clamp. So I will quickly take the strings off and turn the camera off, because this kind of stuff, you are supposed to do a dry run, but with this kind of situation usually you get away without it, because this is a very simple clamping procedure usually. I just didn't realize I couldn't turn the clamp, and I wanted to clamp this with strings on, but I guess I have to do it without. So here you can see the clamp sitting. I use a piece of wood, and below that is a kind of fret polisher, and below that is a sheet of Teflon. The fret polisher will do that, will nicely adapt to the surface of the top. Okay, here you can see that in all these areas where the guitar didn't receive any light, under the neck, under the pickguard, the varnish turned into a complete brown mess. Or I don't know, not a mess, it still looks clean, but I've never seen that. I've seen guitars changing their colors. On Rodebold Hoyas you see it quite a bit, especially where the light hits and where not, but I saw it other way around. Okay, here you can read on the headstock it says foreign. And that was a thing in East Germany. They would produce their best guitars for export reasons and then sell them. So, and I know Musima, I think, used this foreign stamp sometimes on the back on the headstocks. Anyway, I'm not sure which brand this is. Here you can see me pulling the first fret and checking out which size it is. And these old frets barely have any barb, so usually you can pull them out quite easily without damaging the fretboard. Then I pulled out all the frets and cut the nut, the wood behind the nut slightly, and heated it so I can knock it off without destroying the wood behind the 0 fret, because often there's not much left. And if this fret slot is very deep, you can easily break off the wood. So heat it, make sure it doesn't break. The nut came in one piece, the next stayed. Here the tuners, it's the original tuners. I took everything off, and now I will check the radius of a fretboard. I think this one was between 9.5 and 12 somewhere. No, was it? No, sorry, it was between 9.5 and 7.5 inch. So I decided to make it a 9.5, because I think that's a bit easier to play for modern standards, especially if you don't only want to play chords. You can bend it better. It's a bit more modern, and it was somewhere between anyway. So I don't change those too much. And here I use a flat aluminium bar with some very nice self-sticking sandpaper to level it. This takes a bit, you have to do it carefully, always check that you're not removing more material on one side. Frequently check how straight it is. You really don't want a back bow, because back bow is kind of way more annoying than a normal forward bow. So here you can see when you sand a bit, you remove the stuff from the start and from the end. And then if you do that all the way, when the neck is straight, you take a radius sanding block with some sandpaper, and you sand in a 9.5. Yeah, well, you don't have to sand a 9.5 inch radius, but this is what I did here. Sorry, I'm just talking as I go, so. Alright, so now I really sand it to a more or less even radius. Like when you do this per hand, you have to be careful to really hold it straight, otherwise you end up with another radius. And I think that it frets much nicer when it's even. So here you see how the fretboard looks like after I sanded it straight. And now I put on a notch straight edge. Actually I only have a notched to see how straight it is, and it's pretty straight. And what I would do now, I sanded it up to 1000 or something, 115, I think 1000, and oiled this with lemon oil, the standard oil. And now I will put in frets. These vintage German guitars, these German vintage guitars, usually have a slot width, a fret slot width of 0.4 millimeters around. So way thinner, narrower than today's standard. If you try to put in modern frets, it's pretty difficult. But in this case, this guitar doesn't have a truss rod, and we can use basically compression fretting to tilt the back neckwards and give it more stability. To get those bigger frets in, you kind of have to prepare the entrance to the fret slot well, otherwise it just won't go in. So here I use a 3-cornered file first to widen the entrance, and I will find out soon that this was not enough. And now I prepare the first fret to see how everything goes. You didn't see me, of course. I changed the radius of a fret with this thing, what's called fret bender. Yeah. And then with a tang nipper you get the tang off, so you don't have to cut the binding. And now you can put the fret actually in. And I would usually use glue when I fret it, not always so, but in this kind of scenario where the fret sides are too narrow anyway, I think it's a better idea to leave the glue, because if the next person wants to pull this fret out and it's already a very tight slot and it's additionally glued in, that would be probably a very nasty thing to do. So I leave the glue here. They sit very well in that. Don't have to worry about those coming out. Now I notice that the fret just doesn't want to go in because the fret tang is just a bit too wide for the slot. And I try to hammer, it just doesn't want to go in. Well, shit happens. And if you use this kind of fret press, hand press, and the fret is actually not, straight on it, doesn't want to go in, you sometimes just tip it over and it leaves an ugly mark in the wood. So you always have to be careful that it actually goes in and not tipping over when you press it. So here,
oh my God,
I try for a while, and then I feel it's time to widen the entrance a bit for the sled, for the fret. Then I use a 0.7 millimeter saw and very carefully remove a little bit of wood at the entrance. This is a 0.7 blade. I know this works very well for these purposes. Like, sometimes you need this and sometimes you don't. Every fretboard is really unique. Every fretboard frets differently. So you always have to try around a bit with the first fret or with the first few frets, see what works, and then stick with that. Here, like you saw me doing this for the first two frets, and now the speed is what I should have. And as far as I remember, because this is a voiceover, I don't want to talk while I'm working. You have to concentrate enough. As far as I remember, this worked pretty well, and it worked pretty well for all the other frets, so I didn't have problems afterwards getting them in. And they sit very nice. This fretboard was grateful afterwards. Like when I put in the frets, I frequently check if they really sit flush, because you often see this kind of guitars and they just don't sit well, and if they stick out half the way to the top, you kind of have to level half of a fret size away after you're done, and it's just a lot more work, and it looks bad, it plays bad, it sounds bad, so they really have to sit in all the way. I think this is guitar mainly for playing jazz chords, jazz. This is not a shredder guitar where you want to do high bendings and this kind of stuff. So I think normal vintage fret wire and the normal size is kind of good for this guitar. I think this is 2.1 millimeter wide and 1.1 millimeter high. So you can level this like 2 or 3 times before it needs new frets. This is a normal 18% nickel fret wire. There's also 12% nickel fret wire that is usually used on classical guitars. That's also what you usually find on German vintage guitars or on vintage guitars. They used way softer frets back then, so they wear out a bit quicker. But if you want to have the vintage authentic stuff, you actually have to do the shitty frets. Also, they fret very much easier. 12%. If you want to try fretting for the first time, I recommend you using 12% nickel, because those you can hammer way easier. They will just stay where they put them. They don't have their own will. But I wouldn't recommend it to put it on a high-end guitar that you frequently play. Okay, here you see me putting in the first few frets. I always usually do 2 frets at once when I have to nip the tang off. So this way it's a bit less monotonous. Here we go. Like if you wanna put these frets in a little bit too tight spot, it helps to hammer on the ends first and then press it with a jaw, with a fret jaw. And you can use this fret press, a hand press, because it's just very handy. It up to the point where the neck heel starts, and then you kind of have to hammer the frets. And I think with a hammer this is a bit more difficult to learn than this fret press. But once you've figured it out, it usually works smooth. Now the guitar is fretted and I cut off all this little fret that is overhanging the fretboard. The more you can take off with a fret cutter here, the less you have to level with a file. So, and the thing I really like the least about refretting is fret end filing. That's annoying. See all these little metal parts flying around. Horrible. You always have to watch out that they're not laying on your workbench. Alright, that's how it looks like. They sit pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. The only thing missing is the 0 fret, and that will be next on the menu, because the 0 fret has to be or should be slightly higher than the other frets, otherwise you often get a buzz when you play the first fret. Now, apparently I skipped that on video. And anyway, I put one in, and now it comes to leveling the fret ends, rounding the fret ends, smoothing the fret ends, polishing the fret ends. And when I'm done with that, I will slightly level them. This, what you see me using, is this kind of thread end file. It has a flat surface on the bottom, and on the other side it has a round surface, and you can use both ways. First you take off the little edge at the end of a thread, and then you use the other side with a round side on the bottom to smooth the upper side of the thread. Sorry, I'm sometimes looking for words here. Yeah, this actually not too bad once you figured it out. Look, I'm pretty much self-taught, and when I started rounding thread ends, I really didn't understand that less is more. I filed around and it was never coming to a good result. But when you know what kind of movement you have to do, and especially that you don't file too much because you will just create a new step. So you have to get the movement right, and you have to know the procedure. Here I slightly level the threads, and I usually level the lower part of the neck a bit more than the upper part. First of all, there's a lot more threads, so you kind of need to level more often now. And second of all, it helps to have a little bit of relief towards that direction. You can mark the thread tops with a marker, and you can very clearly see where you filed, but I work directly under a window in the roof, and you can see very well where the file hit the thread. So next step is rounding them with a thread file. Here it's important not to file too much, just a little bit, because when these files are very aggressive, and when you use them too much, you would kind of and create an uneven thread height again. So you kind of get very close to where you want to go, and then use sandpaper to finally totally round them. You don't want to file too much there. And I usually use this kind of technique to round over the threads and make them smooth. Sanding through the grids, as you say. And yes, you leave marks on the fretboard a bit, but this is not high grit. You won't see them when I'm done. So you can tape this, depending on what guitar it is, depending on the fretboard and on the stuff you do. If it's lacquered, make the fabric with Alright, now I used the various grids of sandpaper to smooth them, and now I use this thread polishers. I think after 600 I start with a thread polishers. And if you sand in the direction like that's not going with a grain, you always have to use this kind of thread protector, otherwise you will leave very ugly marks in the fretboard. And it's important that the threads get polished in that direction, because that's the way you bend the strings, and that's the way it really has to be smooth. I like to do it crosswise, always in that direction and then 90 degrees other direction. Well, here on and on. Like today you see a lot of people shining the threads, I don't know, up to 12,000 and then polishing with wheels, and I think that looks cool, but I think after 2,000 your fingers don't really feel the difference really. But it helps to sell those guitars. So next one, there's 3 different colors. Next one will be the red one, and then the next one is the yellow one. This little blocks. No cross. Yup. Now I use this kind of sandpaper, bend it in a bow to further smoothen the thread ends. You can start with 240 and then 400, 600, and then they're pretty smooth. You can always do more, but I think after 600, if you do it right, they feel smooth enough for almost everybody. But it's important to, you know, with the files before to do the right job, because if there's too sharp end, the sandpaper will just break and there won't be any progress. So now here we go with the next thread polisher. This one is already super light grit. If you touch the fretboard with this, you won't see that afterwards. So I'm not too scared with this one. With this blue ones, you do see the marks. The blue one I think is 180 grit polishing. I don't know what that means. It's not a 180 grit like sandpaper. It's 180 polish. Maybe someone knows. Anyway, this one is 400 and the yellow ones are 1000. And if you do it up to the yellow one, you have a pretty good result if you really want to do that at home. They're not super shiny, but you can bend well and it will be a good result. You can always do better, but you know, guitars are usually worth a certain amount of money and you can only afford to spend a lot of time with them. You can't afford to spend too much time with them. If you sell them for $400, or you know, you have to stop somewhere. And people on YouTube videos refer always to the ideal way of doing that. If you would have as much money and time on hand as you have, in theory, if you want to live from this, you kind of have to find a way that gives you very good results without spending all day. So since I already made a YouTube video, I will really go with my micromesh set. And you know, this is a high-end expensive guitar, so I think that's fine. But it is a 200 euro guitar, of course, you have to draw the line somewhere. And smooth them up, and all the way up I go to 12,000 because I just talk about it together. Alright. It just looks nice. Polishing. Shout out to my favorite people on YouTube. If you like this guitar repair videos and you want to see someone who's way more skilled than I am, you should check them out. It's amazing video. I can't pronounce it right, fruit whatsoever, and I really recommend it. I learned a lot of stuff watching this video. EVFROOD, I think. Okay, I think I'm done with doing it. As you can see, everything gets very butterly smooth. It's important to always vacuum the areas, because every grit will leave small particles in their size, and if you then use the next grit, they will still be there, and you know, they will in your way, they will scratch. Alright, I think the threading is done here. So we can move to cleaning. Some lighter fluid to get all this debris off the fingerboard, otherwise you'll get black fingers when you play the first time. Look, I'm just watching this video as you do now and explaining what I see myself doing, so sometimes give me a minute. I don't have time to do more than this. I have kids, I have to work a lot, and this video making on YouTube actually takes way more time than I thought. I don't know if I always will make this voice over or not. We'll see how people like it or not. Of course you can get a lot more information about what you see if I do this. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Will be a second half of this video where I finish it and then play it. Please check it out. Bye bye.